Hello, AP. Happy Tuesday. Today we are centering on To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell in a number of different formats. Now, we first should be watching the AP Daily video on Skill 4A from Unit number 4. If you haven't done that, that's what you need to do first. We have a new speaker who's talking to us on our AP Daily videos, and she's leading us through The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, I have a link to The Telltale Heart on Google Classroom. If you haven't read that story or haven't read it in a while, it doesn't take you very long. Go ahead and read the story first before you watch her AP Daily video, and it'll make some things, I think, make more sense as you have that knowledge in the back of your mind, and then you can center on the skill that she wants you to center on that video. So that's the first thing I want you to do for Tuesday. The next thing we're going to do is a 5-steps exercise on To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell. Now, that is in our Sound and Sense book. Matter of fact, it was in our Chapter 5. I skipped it when we went over Chapter 5 in our Sound and Sense book because I knew it was coming up in our Lit book. But it is in our Lit book, and it's in the Sound and Sense book around the same place we are. Now, virtual students, you have not gotten a copy of Sound and Sense poetry, but what I usually do after we cover some of those poems, I will list the poem title. You can Google most of the poems and find them online, so you can read the poems. And that's what we're going to have to do with our Sound and Sense work. You don't have a Sound and Sense book. No one does. They're all here at school. But the titles that we cover, I'll make sure that the ones that I cover as I go over Sound and Sense, that they're found online as well. And I might give you a link, or I might just give you the title, and you can Google the poem yourself as we talk about some things in our Sound and Sense book. Because that was one of the things we were going to do for these last 2 weeks before Christmas break. We were going to go ahead and try to cover more in our Sound and Sense book. Well, now we're not here. So we'll do the best we can on that. Okay, but our daily videos, we can continue doing those just about every single day. Some I'll have one video for you to do, like today. Some I'll have 2 videos that go in a set that I'll want you to watch. Okay? All right, so for To His Coy Mistress, in your in your 5 Steps book, and that's going to have to be your online edition for 5 Steps. You have a link to that. Many of you who've been working from home, you've been doing that successfully. To His Coy Mistress is on pages 9 through 12, and you know to do that and then check in the back, which is at the end of the file online, and check your work very, very carefully. If you miss any, see why you missed the ones that you missed. Okay? So first thing to do is the AP Daily video, Unit 4, Skill 4A, that uses the Telltale Heart. Read the Telltale Heart first if you haven't done that yet. Then go to your 5 Steps exercise and do To His Coy Mistress on pages 9 through 12. After you do that and you've checked your work, and you may have to pause this video or stop it and come back to it a number of times, so feel free to do that, but make sure you come back to it because there are a number of steps in today's work. The next thing we're going to do is take a close look at To His Coy Mistress from the textbook. I have the online edition here in front of us, and I'll be going there, and I'll be pinpointing some things there. But as I told you, this is also in our Sound and Sense book. And so we have a good commentary on To His Coy Mistress as well, looking at this as an example of an extended metaphor. All right? Now, I've asked you, if you've looked at the daily online summary, to do the Comprehension Check exercises after To His Coy Mistress. So do that, and then come back and go through the poem with me, listen to the commentary on the poem, so you can get a really full understanding of this very, very important work from this time period that we're covering in our textbook. So if you have not done your AP Daily video, you have not done your 5 Steps, you have not read To His Coy Mistress and answered your questions, do that first. And then come back to the video, and we'll talk about the poem more at length. Okay, now supposedly you've done all of that, so let's take a look. If you haven't, go back and do it, okay? Here we go. To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell. Let's just look through the poem. Had we but whirled enough in time, this coyness, lady, were no crime. We would sit down and think which way to walk, and pass our long love's day. Thou by the Indian Ganges side shouldst rubies find. I by the tide of Umber would complain. I would love you 10 years before the flood, and you should, if you please, refuse till the conversion of the Jews. My vegetable love should grow vaster than empires and more slow. 100 years should go to praise thine eyes and on thy forehead gaze. 200 to adore each breast, and 30,000 to the rest. An age at least to every part, and the last age should show your heart. For, lady, you deserve this state, nor would I love at lower rate. Now that's the first stanza, and the first different tone that we have as compared to the tone that follows later in the poem. So here we have an extended metaphor about how long, if I had all the time in the universe, how long I would have to love you. And so our lover is talking to his beloved right there. Had we but world enough in time? Now, we don't have world enough in time. So that's the first problem. But if we had world enough in time, if we had all the time in the world, I would praise every little part of you for hundreds of years. He uses an expression that's become very famous here, vegetable love. Just like an oak tree, let's say, grows from a small acorn, and decade after decade after decade after decade after decade, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and sometimes can live 100+ years. He said, that's how I'd love our love to be. But that's not possible. We are mortal, we have limited lifespans, and he knows that. He knows that we don't have all that time in the world. He said, I would love you until the conversion of the Jews, and that's an expression that he's using for the end of time, until Judgment Day. My vegetable love should grow vaster than empires and more slow. 100 years should go to praise your eyes and on your forehead gaze. 200 for each breast, and 30,000 years to spend admiring the rest. But we don't have that long. So look at the change, the shift we have right here. But at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near, and yonder all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. Thy beauty shall no more be found, nor in thy marble vault shall sound my echoing song. Then worms shall try that long-preserved virginity, and your quaint honor turn to dust, and into ashes all my lust. The grave's a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace. Ah, now we have something that those of us who have read quite a few John Donne poems may be used to. John Donne has this same basic theme. And so it must have been a very common theme for poetry back in those days, right? That since we don't have a whole lot of time, let's get together while we can. And that's exactly what he's doing here. Now we have a word for that in Cavalier poetry, and this is that time period, and the word is carpe diem. Seize the day. Live for today. Because the Cavaliers never knew whether they were going to have a tomorrow or not. The Puritans and the Cavaliers were fighting. Now here's the ironic part. Andrew Marvell was a Puritan, but he often wrote like a Cavalier. He had friends in both camps. He was a Puritan, but he had plenty of Cavalier friends. And that influence, we can tell, is found many times in his work. And so, even though he's a Puritan, he jumps on the Cavalier bandwagon with this kind of poem, a carpe diem poem to seize the day, because we don't have all the time in the world to love each other. Now, here's his conclusion. Now therefore, while the youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew, and while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with distant fires, now let us sport us while we may, and now like amorous birds of play, rather at once our time devour than languish in his slow chat power. Let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness up into one ball, and tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. Thus, though we cannot make our son stand still, yet we will make him run. So I've asked you to do the comprehension check questions at the end of our poem. And if we turn to those, and those are found on page 476, we have, what adjective does the speaker use to describe the behavior and attitude of his mistress? Now, if you haven't had a chance to answer those questions, pause the video for a while, go ahead and do those 4 questions, and then come back. Number 1, The speaker says that she is coy or modest, but flirtatious. She's holding back when she should take advantage of love. So we'd say she's playing hard to get. And he's saying, we don't have time for that. 2, under what circumstances would the speaker be willing to accept his mistress's reluctance? He says that he would wait if there were enough time, but there's not enough time. What does the speaker always hear at his back? He says he hears time's winged chariot hurrying near. Our more modern expression is tempus fugit, time flies. What course of action does the speaker propose in the final stanza? The speaker presses his mistress to take his proposal seriously before their youth is gone. So if we turn to our commentary book from our Sound and Sense Poetry series, our editor says, perhaps the greatest obstacle to student understanding of the poem is the title. The word mistress has none of the common modern meanings. The lady of the poem is in fact a virgin. Also, the word coy means no more than modest or reluctant, without its usual modern connotations of teasing or playing hard to get, although I think that's suggested in the poem. The lady seems reluctant to accede to her lover's pleas because of honor, which requires that she preserve her virginity until marriage. But the young man is not proposing marriage. In short, this is a simple seduction poem, very common to the Cavalier period. It is a carpe diem poem, certainly. The speaker seems to belittle this lady's honor as of no importance in the face of brevity of life and the imminence of death. Life being so short, they must enjoy their pleasures now. He puts his argument into this form. A, if we had enough time, your coyness would not be a crime. B, but time rushes on, death comes quickly, and nothing follows. C, therefore, we should make love now. The poetic force of the poem derives not from the cogency of the syllogism, but from the fancy, the wit, the imaginative force with which it is presented. First, the speaker elaborates the temporal with the spatial dimension. If they had whirled enough in time, he says, not only could they stretch out the courtship from 10 years before the flood, an immeasurably distant time past, till the conversions of the Jews, an inconceivably remote time in the future, but they could pass their time separated by oceans and continents even. She looking for rubies along the river Ganges in India, he complaining in verse or song of her coldness by the river Humber in England. He could allow his vegetable love to grow vaster than empires and more slow. The phrase vegetable love suggests a love bloodless and unimpassioned, capable only of growth, subtly makes such a prospect seem undesirable. He could also spend the amount of time praising her beauty that each of the features deserves, and would end up praising her heart, implying that his love for her is really more than physical, as he would be glad to demonstrate it if he had time. The tone of the first section, though, is fanciful and playful. We really do not take this man seriously. It is appropriately the longest of the poem's 3 sections because it depicts a state of nature in which there's no need to hurry. At line 21, though, the tone changes dramatically. It becomes urgent. The speaker constantly feels time's winged chariot about to overtake him. Time is at his back, and ahead, after death, he sees nothing but deserts of vast eternity. Eternity is a desert, a vast blank, a place without life. In the grave, she will lose her beauty. He will no longer be able to sing her love songs. She will lose her long-preserved virginity. Her quaint honor will turn to dust. And therefore, he says, so will his lust. Therefore, says the speaker, let us get together while we are young and eager, desiring and desirable. Let us love not with a vegetable love that takes forever, but like amorous birds of prey, like hawks or eagles. Let us devour time before time devours us. And so that's really his meaning. Whether it's in loving someone or in whatever he's doing, he's afraid that time's going to catch up with them, just as time has caught up with us on this video. These videos have a 15-minute limit, and so I'm just about there. So we're going to have to close out the poem. But this is our poem that we're concentrating on to see that extended metaphor that he uses that he calls vegetable love. All right, have a good day.